This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, good. So good morning. And we are starting a whole new book, a whole new Sefer. All right, Shmot, we are, if you have your own Chumash, it's Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph in Shmot. If you're with the stone Chumash, we're on page 292. And the question is asked, why do we have 5 Chumashim? Right? Chumash actually comes from the root word chamesh. Chamesh is 5. Chomesh is 1/5. We have the Pentateuch, however you pronounce that, right? Which is the 5 books of Moses. So why are there 5 books? Why isn't there just one Torah? Why divide it up into 5 different books? And Ramban, in his classic manner, explains that each Sefer has its main point, its focus. You know, it's almost like asking a florist, "Oh, why do you arrange the flowers with this over there and that over there and that? Just put it all together and charge me a little bit less," right? But the florist, it is a garden. It is artwork, how it is properly arranged. And Ramban explains that Bereshit is the book of beginnings. It is the book of creation. Both the book of the physical creation, to which the Torah only devotes about 20 or so psukim. It's not meant to be a science book, a physics book. And the rest of it is all about the development of humanity, of Adam and Noah and the generation of the flood, taking responsibility, taking ownership, recognizing God, and then we transition to the Avot and the Imahot, the patriarchs and the matriarchs, laying down the moral foundations of this world. And it is the book of the roots. And that is why it goes right up until the death of Yosef. Because Yosef was in between. He was not one of the Avot, but he was almost a quasi-Av. Because he too gave birth to Shvatim, to tribes. Because his sons, Menashe and Ephraim, are also considered to be tribes of Israel. So Yosef was that link between the Avot and the next subsequent generation. Shmot, the book of Shmot, he says, well, that is the formation of a nation as opposed to individuals. Now a group of 70 are becoming a massive nation, and that is where we are until today. Shmot, he says, is the book of Galut and Geula. It is the book of exile and redemption. That is what this book is about. And with that, he answers questions that are asked on the very first pasuk. Let's see the very first pasuk of Shemot. Kathy, you want to take that? Giving a class now.
I'll try.
Okay.
Let's see. Ve'ele shmot b'nei Yisrael ha'ba'im Mitzrayma et Yaakov ish uveto ba'u.
Beautiful. Ve'ele, and these are the names of the children of Israel. Haba'im Mitzrayma. English, that's present tense. Who ba'im, who were coming, who are coming to Egypt. Et Yaakov, with Yaakov, ish ubeito, each man and his household, ba'u, came. So let's look grammatically at this pasuk, and then let's also look more thematically. When we left off in Bereshit, we left off with the death of Yosef, excuse me. That was the very end of Bereshit. Before that, we had the death of Yaakov, of Jacob. Where did that take place? In Egypt, right? When we left off, the Bnei Yisroel had been in Egypt for decades, 17 years when we came to the death of Yaakov, and then we have the death of Yosef. So we've been there for decades. So why are we repeating the Eile Shmot Bnei Yisrael? We're there already. Why are you telling me these are the names of the children of Israel who came down to Egypt with Yaakov? Each of them came, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. We know. We're there already. We've been there for decades. Why are we reiterating this? That's one question that we could and should ask. Another question is, look at the very first word, ve'ele, and these. What is strange about that word? What's strange about starting the book with that word? So I see you guys were as good as me, as I was when it came to grammar. Probably my worst subject in school, right?
Well, it's a continuation, and these, it starts with and. So you can't start a sentence with and.
We're starting a sentence with and. We're starting a whole sefer, a brand new book. Imagine you open a book and the first word is and. And what? Very, very strange to start a book with vav, with and. And then we have also that, as we translated when we learned that pasuk, that it was a little bit strange. Haba'im Mitzrayma is in the present tense, that are coming to Mitzrayim, that are coming to Egypt, and then we say Ba'u, they came. So we transition over here from the present tense to the past tense. So for this, there are a number of different approaches. The Ramban, well, let me ask another question, not another question, but another point to make over here. We call this the Book of Shmot, the Book of Names. In English, what's it referred to as? Exodus. Which one seems to be a better name? Exodus seems to be a better name, right? You'll forgive my blasphemy here, but the English Exodus, that's what this book is about. This is a monumental and an iconic event in world history, right? You know, the civil rights movement often would refer back to the Jews leaving slavery in Egypt as you know, for a lot of the feeling that they were, you know, in America was viewed as the promised land. That's why you have all of these biblical names for places in the United States, for cities in the United States, for villages in the United States. You have Babylon. I mean, this was Zion. This is iconic. Exodus. Exodus is what it is all about. So why call it by the name of Shemot, of names? So let's come back to the Ramban. Ramban says, why are we reiterating this pasuk? Because this is not, the Torah, as we said before, is not a history book. And therefore, the next book does not necessarily pick up historically, chronologically, where the last one left off. This is its separate garden in the orchard. This is the Sefer, this is the book of exile and redemption. And therefore, as such, we have to reiterate with the start of the exile. When did the exile begin? Ve'ele Shmot b'nei Yisroel haboyim Mitzrayim, and these are the names of the children of Israel who came down to Egypt. We know that already. We've been there already. We've learned that already. But that is the very essence, the very focus of this Sefer, which is exile and redemption. And therefore it needs to start with the very start of the exile, and it needs to end with the very end of the redemption. And that, he says, explains why it begins with Ve'ele. Because if you look back in Bereshit on page 258, which is Perek Mem Vav, Pasuk Vav 46:6, page 258, verse 6. This is where Yaakov is going down to Egypt. Verse 6 begins, Vayikhu et mikneim, they took their cattle, their rechusham, and their property. Vayavo Mitzrayim, and they came to Egypt. Yaakov, Jacob, v'chol zaro ito, and all of his children with him. Pasuk Zayin, Banav uvnei Banav ito, sons, grandsons, benotav, daughters, benot Banav, sons and daughters, v'chol zaro, all of his seed. Hevi ito Mitzrayim, he brought with him to Egypt. And now look at Pasuk Chet. Ve'ele Shmot b'nei Yisroel habayim Mitzrayim, Yaakov uvanav, and these are the names of the children of Israel, habaim Mitzrayim, who were coming to Egypt, Yaakov uvanav, and then we go through all of the names over here. So this is the very pasuk that we are reiterating. Why does it start with Vav? Because this is the quote from Bereshit of the start of the exile. So therefore, Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael, and these are the names of b'nei Yisrael, Habaim Mitzrayim. Back to us in Shemot, who are coming, an exact quote. Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael Habaim Mitzrayim. But then we don't go into all the detail that we went into on page 258 over there in Bereshit, because we don't need to go into all of the detail. Therefore, we just say, Eit Yaakov, along with Jacob, Ish uveito bo, each man and his household came, and we list the sons, and Joseph was in Egypt. And then we get into this geula, this galus, and then we start to explain how we descended into this galut. What happens? Pasuk Vav, verse 6, back to us now, 292. Vayamat Yosef. First of all, Joseph died. Okay, Joseph is the one who was the viceroy of Egypt over there, a lot of power, and they had, or they should have had, a lot of respect and a lot of appreciation for Joseph. V'chol Achav. Next step, all the brothers also died. That whole generation was no longer with us. The Chol Hador Ahu, all the brothers, and then that whole generation. And then what happens? Bnei Yisrael started to multiply. Vatimalei haaretz otam, and the land was filled with them. Vayakam melech chadash al Mitzrayim, and a new king arose over Egypt, asher lo yada et Yosef, who did not know Yosef, did not know Joseph. How could he possibly not know Joseph? Well, who is this new king? That our sages debate, Rashi brings. Some say it actually was a new king. Others say it was old king, new decrees, right? A new way of dealing, new laws. But either way, if it's the old king, he's certainly a new Yosef. And if it's a new king, elementary Egyptian history would dictate that he knows Yosef. Rashi says, Asa atzmo ki'ilu lo yida'o. He made himself as if he did not know Yosef. He acted as if he did not know Yosef. Meaning, very often, the contributions that we as Jews have made very often, very quickly, gets forgotten and gets negated. During Nazi Germany, the trains that were going to Auschwitz, which were mostly cattle trains, and the people were shoved in like cattle, but there also were passenger cars in the front. And decorated Jewish war heroes from World War I were sent to Auschwitz in a passenger car, not in a cattle car, but sent to Auschwitz in a passenger car. That's what Rashi's saying here. Asa atzmo ki'ilu lo yada. He made himself as if he did not know Yosef. And he said to his people, they're becoming too numerous. Come, let us be wise. Otherwise, a war will come. They will be that fifth column, I believe, as it's referred to. They'll join our enemies and they'll chase us out of the land. Page 294, Pasuk Yud Aleph, and he pointed over them officers in order to afflict them with their burdens. And they built Are Miskanot, they built these storage cities for Paro, Pitom, and Ramses. And we continued to multiply, and they embittered our life with harder and harder work. And then it reached the point of genocide. Only then did Paro tell the midwives, kill every boy. Throw him into kill every boy. And this also is a very strong echo of Nazi Germany and other places, other times in our history, where, if you think about it, right, the Nazi regime was taking citizens of the country, arresting them for no crime besides their religion, stripping them of all that they had, working them to death, and then murdering them. That could only happen, with two things. One thing that we see over here, that could only happen because there was a gradual dehumanization of these Jewish citizens of the country with different laws that very, very gradually move them out of the rhythm of society, out of the fabric of society. They were not us. They're not part of us. They are different. And gradually, you could reach the point of genocide. And that is the stages that Paro also needed to do.
So like dehumanizing a
Yes,
person.
yes. That's what the Nazis did. And slowly the Jews were thrust out of society there. Once they are the other, then tragically, there's almost no limit what human beings will do to those that they consider to be the other, outsiders. In the case of Nazi Germany, I think it also needs to be said that it only was able to succeed because it was built on centuries of Christian anti-Semitism that the people had been fed and fed and fed and fed. And therefore, they were all that willing to buy into it. And, you hear stories, neighbors. They were good neighbors for 50 years. And in a flash, that's where the Jews live. They point them out to the police, to the Nazi, to the SS, whoever it is. And then without any qualms at all, they'd move into their house and take all their things. And yeah, it was gradual. But let's peel it back a little bit. So this Pasuk Chet, verse 8, this new king arose who did not know Yosef. So the simple meaning, like we said, Rashi says, he acted as if he did not know Yosef. There are those that explain, Asher lo yada et Yosef. He didn't know, he didn't learn the lesson of Yosef. Meaning what? So the reason why he wanted all the boys to be thrown in, right? Why not all the girls? I mean, if you want to cut down on the population, right? If there's lots of girls and just a few boys, there can be lots of babies. But if there's lots of boys and only a few girls, then there can't be many babies. So if you want to cut down on the population, it makes, don't get upset with me, all these ladies here, right? But it makes more sense to go after the ladies, to go after the girls, than it is to go after the boys. But he was told that he was afraid of the Jewish Savior being born, that his soothsayers had told him the Jewish Savior is going to be born. Actually, when they said this is the day, then kol haben hayulod, every boy that was born had to be thrown into the Nile, Egyptian and Jewish. See, he was trying to prevent the Redeemer of Israel. That's what is meant, Asher lo yada et Yosef. He did not know Joseph, meaning he did not learn the lesson of Joseph. What is the lesson of Joseph? Devar Hashem Yakum. The word of God, the will of God, the master plan will be fulfilled. The master plan is going to happen. That's the lesson of Joseph. That the brothers tried to stymie that master plan of God. Joseph's dreams were prophecy. And he would end up in a position of power. Not just in a position of power, but in a position of supporting. The first dream were that the 11 sheaves are bowing down to his sheaf. He would end up being the mashbir, the mechalkel, the one who would be supporting all of them. And the lesson of Joseph is, if you try to stop it, God will not stop you from doing what you're doing, but the master plan is going to be fulfilled. That is the lesson of Yosef. God's will be fulfilled. He's supposed to rise to the top. He will rise to the top. You try to prevent it by selling him as a slave. Fair enough. We will incorporate that. God will incorporate that into his master plan. And he's sold as a slave down to Egypt and ends up in the house of Potiphar. And there he rises to the top, only to be accused falsely and then imprisoned. But there in the prison, who happens to be there? The butler and the baker. And he interprets their dreams. And then when Paro has dreams and no one can interpret it in a fashion that is acceptable to the Pharaoh, all of a sudden the butler speaks up and says, I have to speak about my past sin, that I was in prison, but there was a boy there. And he knocks him down. He was a nar, a lad, ivri, eved, slave, ivri. All the reasons why he should not be elevated. Paro said, bring him here. And he brings him there and he interprets the dream and he becomes second in command. He becomes the one who supports the brothers. The lesson of Yosef is the master plan will be fulfilled. As much as you might try to stymie it, to stifle it, it will be fulfilled. Not only that, but your actions that you're doing to prevent it will be incorporated into the master plans, and that is what will bring about its actualization, its realization. Not only won't you stop it, we'll say thank you very much and use your actions to make it happen. Asher lo yadat Yosef, he didn't learn the lesson of Yosef, and he tried to stop this Moshiach, this Redeemer of Israel. And as we'll see, this is the second classic example. Everything he did to stop the Moshiach of Israel ended up bringing about the realization of the Redeemer of Israel. What did he do? Every boy has to be thrown into the Nile. Who gets thrown into the Nile? The Moshiach shel Yisroel. Baby Moshe gets thrown into the Nile. Not thrown, but placed in a basket by his mother and sister into the Nile. And who pulls him out? None other than Paro's daughter. So exactly what he was trying to prevent, ultimately what happens? It is the house of Paro that houses, it is Paro himself that houses the Redeemer of Israel, clothes the Redeemer of Israel, feeds the Redeemer of Israel, educates the Redeemer of Israel, turns the Redeemer of Israel into a person who is able and qualified to be the Redeemer of Israel. So exactly what he did to try to prevent it was incorporated, was woven into the fabric of the master plan. And that is exactly what brought about the Moshiach shel Yisroel, the Redeemer of Israel. But he was lo yada et Yosef. This Paro did not know Yosef, did not learn the lesson of Yosef, and therefore repeated the same errors and the same pattern that the brothers of Yosef went through, trying to stop it, and their actions being the whole system that brings about its fulfillment. That's one approach on Ve'ele Shemot. The other is a very interesting approach by the Seforno. And that deals with the Ve'ele and also will deal with this idea of Shemot. Shemot meaning names. And we asked, Exodus seems to be a much more resounding name for this book than Shemot, names. What's his names? Right? So very good. These are the names of the children who came out to Egypt. And we mentioned Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Yosef was in Egypt. End of names. Right? It took all of 3-4 psukim. We finished the names. Yet the whole book, the actual name of the book is Shemot, is names. So let's understand that. Let me read to you a little bit of the Seforno, what he says over here. The Seforno says, Ve'ele Shemot, Eila nizkarim b'kan, those that are being mentioned over here, ru'uyim, are worthy, lihi vada b'shem. These are the ones that we should make known their names. These are the ones who are worthy to be called by their names. Ki kol achad mehem ra'ui liot nechshav ish. Each one of them was worthy of being an ish al shemo, a person by their name. Hamoreh al tsurato ha'ishiyit, which shows about his tsura, his stature, what they had reached. V'lo yatsa dor l'tarbut ra'ah, and they were able to keep the whole generation in check, in line. However, acharei motam, after their death, lo hayu atzadik shebeineim kol kach chashuvim. After their death, the others were not on that same level. And that is why we had a precipitous drop in our level, and the shibud and the slavery began. A name is a very interesting thing. People love to hear their name. Have you noticed that? When I'm talking, if I say Cheryl, I say Kathy, I say Rose, I say Ateret, I say Miri, people like to hear their name. And actually, there's a very spiritual aspect to that. Because a name, so he's saying the Eileh Shemot. We've had a lot before in the previous Sefer, lots and lots of names. But the Eileh Shemot, but these are the names. And it's almost but, with all those names that we mentioned, yeah. And these are the names of those who came to Mitzrayim. These are those who fully self-actualized. I think a reason that we don't realize it, well, why do we like to hear our names? Why do we feel so good when we see someone we haven't seen in a while, and the person doesn't say, oh, you look so familiar, just remind me of your name. The person says, oh, Cheryl, Kathy, Rose, Miri, Teret, so good to see you.
Because we like to be recognized?
We like to be recognized, right? Our name is our identity, our uniqueness to a degree, even though others might have the same name, but it means that you are recognizing me as a unique individual. I'm not just one of the crowd. I am an individual, a unique individual that is important to you. That's why we like to hear our names. It makes us feel I have importance. I matter. I make a difference. I exist. I'm here. I'm a somebody. Right? And that's why the Nazis put numbers on us. That was all part of the demonization. You're not a person. You're a number. That's all you are. A name is a very important thing. Now, there's a teaching that we have later on in Devarim from the Or HaChaim that every person, or I should say every parent, was a prophet at some point. And the point where every person was a prophet is when we named our children. And the name that we gave our children is actually their name in the highest spiritual places. That's who they could be. That is what they could become. And the life that is given to us is an opportunity to take this Yisroel Yehuda and to transform him into that Yisroel Yehuda. That is what life is. Life is this opportunity to self-actualize, to become, and again, the prophecy of the parent, they understood that this little infant, that is their name, that is their essence. Remember, a name is the essence. We had back in the beginning of Bereshit, we said there that Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, that all the animals were brought before them. And whatever name they gave them, that was its name, the pasuk says. It doesn't say that became its name. The verse there back by Adam says that was its name, meaning he was able to look into the essence of each of these animals and understand this is a sus, this is a samich vav samach, a horse, this is a para, a pei, reish, hey, a cow. The name is the essence, and the parent nails it every time. When we name a child, we're nailing it. That is the essence. And life is meant to be this journey from who we are born as to throughout our life, with all the challenges and all the glory and all the defeat that goes through life. All that we go through in life is all meant to bring out who we are in its fullest. So the Sforno says, Ve'ele Shmot. These are the ones who maximized. These are the ones who became all that they can be. And that's why in the Torah, sometimes we'll have a name back to back. Yaakov, Yaakov. Moshe, Moshe. Avraham, Avraham. When it says that by somebody, that means that that person was incredible. That Avraham became Avraham. That Yaakov became Yaakov. That Moshe became Moshe. They bridged that gap from their physical name, who they were over here, to that self-actualization of what they could become. They made that journey. They got there. And fascinatingly enough, in the Torah, when it says Avram, there's something called a psik. In the Torah itself, there is a line separating one Avram and the other Avraham. There is a psik, a line separating Yaakov, Jacob. But by Moshe, there is no psik. There is no line separating. And that the Nefesh HaChaim explains that Avram and Yaakov were before the Torah was given. So therefore, as close as they got to Avram, Yaakov, there was a little bit of a separation, a little buffer. Because without the Torah, they cannot get completely there. Moshe already had the Torah. There it's Moshe without that psik, without that buffer, without that separation. And our job in our life is self-actualization, to try to become the greatest version of ourself. Right? You know, I wish I had that person's mind. I wish I had that person's this. I wish I had that person's that. Right? And the key, of course, is with who you are to become the best version of you. No one is expected to be anyone else. You're not expected to have the mind of this and the heart of that and the passion of this. But with your mind, with your heart, with your passion, we must become the best version of ourselves. That is all that is given to us. That is our mission in life. And for that, we have to come down from the heavens, so to speak. Our neshama needs to come down into a body and deal with all of the stuff that life sends us, all of the challenges, all of the difficulties, all the beauty and all the less than beauty that life serves us up. And only then can we return back up into the spiritual realm in an elevated, greater manner, in which we can then become our name. And that is why it's very interesting. If you guys have a Siddur handy, at the end of every Amidah, right? If you have a Siddur, look with me. If not, you'll just take my word for it. Right? On page 118 in the Siddur, at the end of every Amidah, we have the paragraph of Elokai Nitzor. Right? God, Hashem, guard my tongue from evil. And then at the very end of that paragraph, it says in the art scroll, some recite verses pertaining to their names at this point. See page 924. And on page 924, in the back of the art scroll, you have a list of all the names. And you have a pasuk, you have a verse that begins with the first letter of your name and ends with the last letter of your name. That is your pasuk. That is your verse. And we have the custom to insert your verse in every Shmona Esrei at this latter point, the Shmona Esrei, before you say the last Yula Ratzonim Refi, V'Egel Libi Ufanecha Hashem Suri V'Go Ali, you insert your verse that is aligned with your name. And that is a way to remember your name, because we are told that one of the first questions when a person enters the spiritual realm, crosses that Gesher HaChaim, the bridge of life from our physical world to the spiritual world, the first question that's asked is, what is your name? And this is not like, the SAT that you get 400 points for filling in your name. What is your name is asking, who are you? What are you about? What is your name? What is your essence? What is it that you were supposed to accomplish? Have you become your name? Have you done that which you were supposed to do? Have you fulfilled your mission or not? And it's a tremendous embarrassment if a person forgets their name at that point, because that is an indication that they forgot their mission. And we have this segula, this idea to say your name, say that pasuk that relates to your name every time you say the Amidah. And I'd say it's not just voodoo that then you'll remember your name, but that is supposed to help us focus on our mission in life, in what we are meant to accomplish. If any of you need help in determining what your pasuk is, just send me a text, send me an email. I'll be very happy to work with you on that to make sure you know what is your name, what is your pasuk. But that's what a name represents. A name represents this process that we go through to become that which we are meant to be. Ve'ele Shemot, the Sforno says, and these are the names. With all the names that we had before, these are the names. The next generations did not reach that stature of becoming their names. Ve'ele Shemot. And these are the names of Bnei Yisrael, Habayim Mitzrayma, right, who came or who are coming to Egypt, right? Just to go back, before we double back to this, we asked before, why does it say Habayim Mitzrayma, that they're coming as if they're coming now? They came a long time ago. Well, as we said before, with the death of Joseph and his brothers and that whole generation, it was as if we had just arrived, meaning we were now being treated in a very, very different manner. So therefore, it was Habayim. It was as if we were coming now. It's as if we had now arrived, because the landscape had changed drastically, and their deal and the way we were being treated and dealt with was completely different. It was as if we just came today. It's as if we did not have any history there. That's the Habayim. Now, we asked, isn't Exodus a better name? And according to the Ramban, this is the book of exile and redemption. So what is exile and redemption? Exile means being placed into an environment that is a challenging environment, but it is the best environment for us at that time. We mentioned this before. Adam and Eve were chased out of the Garden of Eden because the Garden of Eden was no longer their optimal environment. Outside of the Garden of Eden, once they sinned, became their optimal environment, which means outside of the Garden of Eden became their Garden of Eden. If Garden of Eden is going to be defined as the optimal environment, so as long as they were meant to be inside there, that was their Garden of Eden. Once it was no longer their optimal environment, they were sent out of there into their optimal environment. Exile, galut, is being sent into a challenging environment in order to bring out latent abilities, in order to self-actualize, at which point then you could reach the point of geula, of redemption. So now, does this sound very similar to what we said before? So we went into Egypt, into exile, because that was the environment where we would have challenges and be able to self-actualize and ultimately become redeemed. When else did we just discuss going through such steps? Life. Life is we are sent away from the spiritual realm down into this world with all of its confusion, with all that which is masked over here, all that which is hidden. Olam, world, means hidden. It's the place where God hides himself. And we're sent here in order to self-actualize, that we can become the best version of ourselves. What one word, my friends, what one word encapsulates this idea of going through this process and becoming our best version of ourselves? What one word encapsulates exile and redemption? Shmot. Names. Because my name is who I am and what I can be, and my job is to bridge that gap. So
To
we
grow.
ask, so if it's the, I'm sorry, Rose?
I said to grow.
Yes.
To grow
So
into
we
that.
ask, exactly, to grow into that, to develop into that. So we asked, why is it called Shemot, names? Exodus is a better name. Exile and redemption is a better name. But that is actually what Shemot means. That is what a name is. A name is a process of coming down to this world, coming down to a foreign environment, gaining as a result of that and self-actualizing, becoming the best version of ourselves, and then returning. So the word name, Shmot, actually is almost a code word for Galut and Geula, for exile and redemption. This is the book of the national exile and redemption, and each of us go through our own personal exile, coming down into this physical world, redemption, returning back to our spiritual root, our spiritual home, back to our shame, back to our name, that coming together of us and our name. So our calling it the Book of Shmot is not simply because, oh, well, the first 6 verses list different names. No, this Book of Shmot is all about this journey. A name is a journey. And our journey is individualized. Our journey is unique. Our journey is special. And that is why we hear our name. We love to hear our name, because it reminds us that we are unique. We are special. We are on our own very, very unique journey. And that is Galut and Geula. That is exile and redemption. That is on a national scale, and each and every one of us are living that on a personal scale. Okay, my friends. A good start to the Book of Shmot. Not the Book of Exodus, but the Book of Names. Okay, everybody. Have a very good day. Have a very good day. You're very welcome. And Thursday, we have a very interesting class about the requirements to be the Jewish Messiah. I always like to do that around this time of the year, around this season. It's important for us to know it and be very clear about that. Okay, everybody. Have a very good day. Good seeing you all.
Thank you.
Be well.